The vampire king raised his glass to toast his engagement when the waitress whispered, "It's poisoned." "Run now." His future in-laws smiled warmly across the table, watching him drink. What he didn't know, this dinner was never about celebration. It was his execution, wrapped in wedding promises. The crystal chandelier above table 7 cast fractured rainbows across the white tablecloth, but Alaric couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. He'd ruled for 3 centuries, survived wars, betrayals, and countless assassination attempts. Yet tonight, sitting across from his fiancée Isabella and her aristocratic parents at Elysium City's most expensive rooftop restaurant, his instincts screamed danger louder than ever before. "More wine, Your Majesty." The waiter's voice pulled Alaric back to the present. He nodded, watching as the crimson liquid, a rare vintage from the southern vineyards, filled his glass. Isabella smiled at him, her emerald eyes catching the candlelight. She looked breathtaking in her silver gown, completely unaware of the tension coiling in Alaric's chest. To new beginnings, Isabella's father, Lord Cassius Thornwell, raised his glass. His smile didn't reach his eyes. "May the union of our families bring prosperity to both our worlds." Lady Thornwell, Isabella's mother, lifted her glass with practiced elegance. The massive ruby ring on her finger glinted, but it was the symbol etched into the band that made Alaric's blood run cold. He'd seen that mark before, in ancient texts, in warnings whispered by his advisors. It was a protection rune, against vampires. To unity, Isabella echoed, oblivious to the undercurrent of tension. Her hand found Alaric's under the table, squeezing gently. "Between humans and vampires. Between our hearts." Alaric forced himself to smile. This marriage was supposed to end centuries of bloodshed. The Royal Vampire Court and the Human Aristocracy Council had negotiated for years to reach this moment. Isabella was genuinely kind, intelligent, and brave enough to love a creature most humans feared. He'd fallen for her against every instinct that told him to keep his distance. But her parents. "A toast then," Alaric said smoothly, lifting his glass. The wine's aroma hit him first, rich, deep, with notes of blackberry and oak. And underneath it all, something else. Something that made every nerve in his body scream. Blessed silver. Wolfsbane. Sanctified ash. The holy trinity of vampire poison. His hand froze halfway to his lips. 300 years of survival instinct took over, but he couldn't make a scene. Not here. Not with 12 tables of Elysium City's elite watching. Not with the peace treaty hanging by a thread. "Is something wrong, darling?" Isabella asked, her brow furrowing with concern. Before Alaric could answer, a pale hand reached across his shoulder, setting down a small plate of appetizers. The waitress, a young woman with silver blonde hair pulled into a tight bun, leaned close under the pretense of adjusting his napkin. Her whisper was so quiet, only his vampiric hearing could catch it. "Run now, my king." They poisoned it. Alaric's entire body went rigid. The waitress straightened immediately, her face blank and professional as she stepped back. But her eyes, storm gray and ancient, held his for just a fraction of a second. There was recognition there. Warning. Urgency. "Your Majesty?" Lord Thornwell's voice cut through the moment. "You seem distracted." Alaric looked down at his wine glass. The poison was expertly masked, but now that he knew, he could sense it. The slight shimmer of blessed silver particles suspended in the liquid. The faint, sickly sweet scent of wolfsbane extract. This wasn't just meant to weaken him. This was designed to kill him slowly, painfully, while maintaining the appearance of natural illness. His mind raced. If he refused to drink, they'd know he was aware. If he made a scene, Isabella would be caught in the crossfire. If he drank, the poison would start eating through his system within minutes. But if he ran without drinking, they'd strike immediately. Across the table, Lady Thornwell's fingers drummed against her wine glass, once, twice, 3 times. A signal. Alaric's enhanced vision caught movement in the shadows. For men in waiter uniforms, positioned at the restaurant's exits. Their heartbeats were too calm, too controlled. Trained killers. Isabella was still looking at him with those trusting green eyes, completely unaware that her parents had just tried to murder her fiancé. Or was she? No. Alaric pushed the thought away. He'd spent months learning to read Isabella's emotions, her tells. She was genuine. Which meant her parents had kept her in the dark about tonight's true purpose. Forgive me, Alaric said with a smile that had charmed queens and terrified enemies. I was just admiring the view. He gestured toward the floor-to-ceiling windows showcasing Elysium City's glittering skyline. It's not often we vampires dine with such elevated company. Lord Thornwell's eyes narrowed slightly. Lady Thornwell's drumming stopped. Alaric made his decision in a heartbeat. He lifted the glass to his lips and drank. The poison hit his tongue like liquid fire. Holy water mixed with the wine, blessed silver burning tracks down his throat. Wolfsbane spread like ice through his veins. Sanctified ash settled in his stomach like ground glass. Every survival instinct screamed at him to spit it out, but Alaric swallowed smoothly, setting the glass down with steady hands. Excellent vintage, he said calmly, even as agony began to spread through his chest. Isabella beamed. I'm so glad you like it. Father chose it specifically for tonight. How thoughtful, Alaric replied, his voice showing none of the pain currently shredding his insides. He could feel the poison beginning its work, his regeneration fighting against the holy toxins, buying him time, but not much. He needed to leave. Now. But he couldn't let them know he knew. If you'll excuse me for just a moment, Alaric said, pushing his chair back with controlled grace. I left Isabella's gift in the carriage. I'd like to present it before the main course arrives. Oh, Alaric, you didn't have to, Isabella started. Nonsense, he cut her off gently, leaning down to kiss her forehead. His lips lingered there for a moment, memorizing her warmth. If tonight went wrong, this might be the last time he'd see her. You deserve the world, my love. I'll return in just a moment. He straightened, meeting Lord Thornwell's gaze. The older man's expression was unreadable, but his hand had moved to rest casually on his lap, right where a concealed weapon would be holstered. Don't be long, Lady Thornwell said sweetly. The kitchen prepared something special for tonight. It would be a shame if it grew cold. I wouldn't dream of missing it, Alaric replied. He turned and walked toward the restaurant's main entrance, every step measured and unhurried despite the poison spreading through his system. His vision was already starting to blur at the edges. The blessed silver was attacking his vampiric blood cells, the wolfsbane was slowing his healing, and the sanctified ash was creating a holy barrier inside his body, preventing him from using his full strength. Whoever designed this poison knew exactly what they were doing. As Alaric passed table 4, he caught movement in his peripheral vision. The 4 waiters had shifted position. They were no longer blocking exits, they were moving to intercept him. He had maybe 60 seconds before they struck. Alaric pushed through the ornate double doors into the restaurant's entrance hall. The maitre d' looked up with a professional smile that died when he saw Alaric's expression. My carriage, Alaric said quietly, his voice carrying just a hint of the command that made humans instinctively obey. Now. The maitre d' snapped his fingers at a valet, who scrambled outside. But Alaric wasn't heading for the main exit. Instead, he turned sharply toward the hallway marked staff only, moving faster now that he was out of the dining room's view. Behind him, he heard chairs scraping. Hurried footsteps. Lord Thornwell's voice calling his name with false concern. They were coming. Alaric burst through the staff door into a narrow hallway lined with supply closets and kitchen equipment. The service exit glowed red at the far end, but standing in front of it was the silver-haired waitress who'd warned him. This way, she hissed, grabbing his arm with surprising strength. They have hunters in the front. The whole building's surrounded. Who are you? Alaric demanded, even as his legs began to weaken. The poison was working faster now. Someone who swore an oath to protect the royal bloodline, she said, yanking open a door marked maintenance. Inside was a steep stairwell leading down into darkness. Move, Your Majesty. We have maybe 30 seconds before they breach this hallway with holy water and stakes. Behind them, the staff door exploded inward. Men in black tactical gear poured through, silver weapons gleaming. Alaric didn't hesitate. He plunged into the darkness, with the mysterious waitress right behind him, the door slamming shut just as the first crossbow bolt whistled through the air. The hunt had begun. The maintenance stairwell was pitch black, but Alaric's vampire vision cut through the darkness like a blade. Each step down felt like descending into his own grave. The poison was spreading faster now. He could feel his regenerative abilities struggling, flickering like a dying candle. "How many exits?" he asked the waitress, his voice steady despite the fire in his veins. "2." Both watched. She moved with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd planned escape routes long before tonight. "But there's a tunnel system under the restaurant. Old subway lines from before the city expansion." Above them, heavy boots thundered against metal. Shouts echoed down the stairwell. The hunters were coming, and they weren't being subtle anymore. "They're not worried about witnesses," Alaric observed, his strategic mind still working even as his body betrayed him. "Which means they paid off the police, the media, everyone." The waitress reached the bottom of the stairs and kicked open a rusted door. "Tonight was supposed to be your execution, wrapped in the illusion of a celebration." Alaric filed that information away. Someone had spent enormous resources to orchestrate this. The question was, who stood to gain from his death? They emerged into a forgotten basement, filled with ancient restaurant equipment covered in dust sheets. The waitress moved like she'd memorized every inch of the space, weaving between metal shelves and broken refrigerators. "The Thornwells," Alaric said, following her. His legs were growing heavier with each step. "How long have they been planning this?" "Long enough to infiltrate the royal guard, bribe half the human council, and forge your fiancé's affection." She glanced back at him, her gray eyes flashing in the dim light. Or so they thought. Alaric's heart, which had barely beaten for 3 centuries, constricted painfully. Isabella knew. "No," the waitress stopped at a heavy grate built into the floor. "Our intelligence suggests she's genuine. They've been manipulating her since childhood, grooming her to be the perfect bride. The perfect distraction." She grabbed the grate's edge. "Help me with this." Alaric knelt beside her, gripping the metal bars. Even with his strength compromised, he managed to help her wrench it open. The smell of stagnant water and decay wafted up from below. "Who sent you?" Alaric demanded as she lowered herself into the hole. "Who do you work for?" Questions later. Survival now. She dropped out of sight. Behind them, the basement door exploded inward. Holy water splashed across the concrete, sizzling where it touched the ground. Blessed silver bullets pinged off metal shelves. Alaric dropped through the grate, landing hard in ankle-deep water. The impact sent spikes of agony through his poison system. His vision swam, darkening at the edges. The waitress caught his arm, steadying him. "Stay with me, Your Majesty. The poison's designed to incapacitate, not kill, not immediately. They wanted you weak for the ritual." "What ritual?" Alaric forced himself to focus. Above them, hunters were shouting, their voices echoing down through the grate. Later, she pulled him forward into the tunnel. Emergency lights flickered sporadically, casting everything in sickly yellow. "Right now, we need to put distance between us and them." They moved through the abandoned subway tunnel, their footsteps splashing in the shallow water. Alaric's enhanced hearing picked up the sounds of pursuit, at least a dozen men, heavily armed, moving with military precision. "The wine," he said, his analytical mind latching onto details even as his body weakened. "It was blessed by someone with real faith. Not just any priest could create a poison that potent." "The Vatican," the waitress confirmed. "They've been collaborating with certain human factions. They call themselves the Crimson Faith, extremists who believe vampires are abominations that must be purged. Peace treaty be damned." Alaric had heard whispers of the Crimson Faith. Radical hunters who rejected the treaty his father had died to establish. But he'd never imagined they'd grown bold enough to target him directly. "Lord Thornwell," he said, pieces clicking into place. "His family lost everything in the Blood Wars. His grandfather was executed by my father for crimes against vampire citizens. Revenge masked as diplomacy," the waitress agreed. "They've been playing the long game." The engagement was never about peace, it was about getting close enough to strike. They reached a junction where 3 tunnels split off in different directions. The waitress pulled out a small compass that glowed faintly blue. Enchanted, Alaric realized. She consulted it briefly, then chose the left tunnel. "The blood moon is in 3 nights," she said as they moved. "During the eclipse, your powers will be at their weakest." That's when they planned the final phase. Final phase. Alaric's legs nearly gave out. He caught himself against the tunnel wall, his hand coming away wet with something that wasn't water. Blood. His blood. The poison was starting to make him hemorrhage internally. The waitress turned back, her expression hardening. "They don't just want you dead, Your Majesty. They want to drain your royal bloodline, all of its power, its legacy, its magic. Lord Thornwell has been working with a blood mage. They plan to transfer your essence into his family line, making them immortal while erasing the vampire throne forever." Alaric stared at her, the full scope of the conspiracy finally becoming clear. This wasn't just an assassination. It was genocide wrapped in a wedding invitation. "Isabella," he whispered. "If they succeed, she becomes a widow before she's even a bride. And her family becomes the most powerful dynasty in both worlds." The waitress moved to his side, supporting his weight. "But first, we keep you alive. Can you walk?" Above them, a church bell began to toll. Once, twice, 3 times. "That's the hunter's signal," the waitress said grimly. "They're mobilizing every asset in the city." Alaric straightened, forcing his body to obey despite the poison screaming through his veins. 300 years of survival instinct kicked in, overriding the pain. "Then we'd better move faster," he said. Behind them, the sound of pursuit grew closer. Ahead, the tunnel stretched into uncertain darkness. And somewhere above, in that glittering restaurant, Isabella was probably just realizing her fiancé wasn't coming back. The tunnel opened into Elysium City's underbelly, a maze of maintenance corridors and forgotten infrastructure that ran beneath the neon-lit streets. The waitress led Alaric through a narrow passage that ended at a ladder bolted to crumbling brick. "Up," she commanded, already climbing. "We need to reach street level. There's a safe house 2 blocks east, but we have to cross through the market district." Alaric gripped the ladder, each rung feeling like it weighed 1,000 pounds. The poison had spread through his entire system now. His veins were visible beneath his pale skin, darkening to black where the blessed silver and wolfsbane mixed with his blood. He could feel his heart, usually so still and quiet, struggling to pump against the toxins. They emerged in an alley behind a closed butcher shop. The night air hit Alaric like a physical blow, thick with the smell of garbage and rain-soaked asphalt. Above, the sky was cloudless, stars barely visible through the city's light pollution. 3 blocks, the waitress corrected herself, pulling him away from the manhole cover. "They'll have drones scanning thermal signatures. We need to stay in the shadows, move fast." The first arrow missed Alaric's head by inches, embedding itself in the brick wall behind him with a sharp thunk. Silver tip. Blessed. Down. The waitress tackled him as a hail of crossbow bolts rained down from the rooftop across the street. They scrambled behind a dumpster as more arrows struck metal, concrete, and asphalt. Alaric's vampiric reflexes were the only thing keeping him alive, but he could feel them slowing, the poison making every movement a second too late. "Rooftop snipers," the waitress hissed, peering around the dumpster's edge. "And ground units converging from both ends of the alley." She pulled a small vial from her pocket, red liquid that glowed faintly. "Drink this. It'll counteract the poison temporarily, give you maybe 10 minutes of full strength." Alaric grabbed the vial, uncorked it, and downed it in one gulp. The effect was immediate and excruciating. The antidote clashed with the poison in his veins, a war raging inside his body. But slowly, agonizingly, his strength began to return. "Who are you?" he demanded again. "Lyra," she said simply. "And right now, I'm the only thing standing between you and a true death." Church bells began to toll again, not from one location, but from multiple churches scattered across the city. The sound overlapped, creating a discordant symphony that made Alaric's enhanced hearing scream in protest. "The Hunters Network," Lyra explained, pulling what looked like a modified smartphone from her jacket. The screen showed a map of Elysium City covered in red dots, all converging on their location. Every bell tower, every safe house, every agent they have. You're not just being hunted, Your Majesty. You're being eradicated. How long have you known about this? Alaric asked, his strength returning enough to stand. His fangs had extended involuntarily, a predator's response to mortal danger. My order intercepted chatter 3 weeks ago. Whispers about the wedding purge. We've been trying to get someone close to you, but your security. She cut herself off. We need to move. Now. They burst from behind the dumpster, sprinting down the alley as crossbow bolts chased them. Alaric moved with renewed speed, the antidote burning away the poison's lethargy. But he could feel it, this was borrowed time. The relief was temporary. They crashed through a chain-link fence into the market district. Even at this late hour, the area was alive with activity, food stalls closing up, merchants counting their earnings, late-night shoppers haggling for deals. The crowd was both a blessing and a curse. Cover, but also witnesses. The hunters won't risk exposure, Alaric said, weaving through the crowd. Too many cameras, too many. An explosion ripped through a fruit stand 20 feet ahead. Produce erupted in a shower of wooden splinters and pulped flesh. Screams filled the air as people scattered. They don't care anymore. Lyra shouted, pulling him down a side street. This is a full purge. They'll blame it on vampire terrorists, use it to break the peace treaty. More explosions followed, small, precise charges designed to create chaos without leveling buildings. Holy water grenades burst against walls, creating barriers that Alaric had to desperately avoid. The blessed liquid would burn through his skin like acid. They vaulted over a collapsed awning, landed in a narrow passage between 2 apartment buildings. Behind them, heavy boots pounded against pavement. Ahead, Alaric could see the passage opening onto a wider street, but blocking the exit were 3 figures in tactical gear, silver weapons drawn. Trapped, Alaric growled. Never trapped, Lyra grabbed a fire escape ladder and yanked it down. Up. They climbed, Alaric's fingers gripping the metal rungs as crossbow bolts sparked off the iron below. The temporary strength from Lyra's antidote was already fading. He could feel the poison surging back, reclaiming territory. They reached the 4th-floor landing just as a bolt grazed Alaric's shoulder. Not deep enough to seriously injure, but the blessed silver burned. He hissed in pain, stumbling. Lyra caught him, kicked open a window, and pulled them both inside someone's darkened apartment. An elderly woman screamed from her bed in the corner. Sorry, ma'am. Lyra called out, dragging Alaric toward the front door. Royal business. They burst into the hallway, raced down 4 flights of stairs, and emerged onto a side street just as the church bells reached a crescendo. Every bell in the city seemed to be ringing now, a sound designed to disorient vampires, to make them panic. But Alaric wasn't panicking. He was calculating. The safe house, he gasped. How far? 2 more blocks, Lyra pointed east, where the neon lights of the entertainment district glowed like artificial daylight. But Your Majesty, the poison. I know, Alaric could feel it. His veins were blackening again, the antidote's effects completely spent. His vision was darkening, and this time, it wasn't coming back. Get me there. Whatever it takes. They ran through streets that had become a war zone. Hunters emerged from every shadow, silver weapons gleaming. Citizens caught in the crossfire fled in terror. Police sirens wailed in the distance, but Alaric knew they wouldn't come. Not for him. The entire city had become his execution ground. And somewhere, in that rooftop restaurant, Isabella was probably just learning the truth about her family. If she survived the night at all. The abandoned cathedral rose from Elysium City's forgotten district like a broken tooth, Gothic spires crumbling, stained glass windows long since shattered, its grandeur reduced to a skeleton of what it once was. Most citizens avoided this part of the city, where the old world met the new and neither claimed victory. Lyra kicked open a side door hidden beneath overgrown vines, pulling Alaric into the musty darkness. The moment they crossed the threshold, the sound of pursuit faded. Not naturally, magically. Alaric felt it, a barrier shimmering across the entrance like invisible silk. Warding spells, Lyra explained, finally releasing his arm. Old magic. The kind that predates the treaty, predates even the blood wars. Alaric collapsed against a rotting pew, his legs finally giving out. The poison had fully reclaimed him now, worse than before. Black veins spider-webbed across his neck and face, visible even in the darkness. His breathing, unnecessary for vampires but instinctive during stress, came in ragged gasps. "You're dying," Lyra stated matter-of-factly, moving to light candles positioned throughout the cathedral's nave. As each flame sparked to life, Alaric saw the space had been prepared. Medical supplies. Ancient texts. Ritual circles drawn in what smelled like blessed salt and vampire blood. How long, he managed? Hours. Maybe less. Lyra knelt beside him, pulling back his collar to examine the blackened veins. "The poison is designed to destroy you from the inside out. Blessed silver is eating your blood cells. Wolfsbane is paralyzing your regeneration. And the sanctified ash," she paused. "It's creating a holy prison inside your body. Even if we purge the other toxins, that ash will keep you weak during the blood moon." "Convenient timing," Alaric said through gritted teeth. Calculated timing. Lyra moved to a makeshift altar where ingredients were laid out with surgical precision. "They've been planning this for years, Your Majesty. This isn't just assassination, it's orchestrated genocide." She began mixing compounds in a silver bowl, ironically, the same metal poisoning him. Blood-red herbs, crushed moonstone, and something that glowed faintly blue. "You keep calling me Your Majesty," Alaric observed, forcing his mind to focus through the agony. "You know protocols. You know poisons. You know safe houses." His eyes, usually crimson, had faded to dull pink. "Who sent you, Lyra?" She paused, her hands stilling over the bowl. When she looked at him, her gray eyes held centuries of grief. "The Order of the Crimson Veil," she said quietly. "We're what remains of your grandfather's royal guard. When he was betrayed and killed, most of the Order died with him. But a few of us survived, scattered, hidden, waiting." Alaric's breath caught. "My grandfather died a century before I was born. You'd have to be 243 years old." Lyra smiled sadly. "We took vows, Your Majesty. Blood oaths that bound our lives to the protection of the royal line. As long as a true heir lives, we cannot die. We've been watching from the shadows, waiting for the moment when you'd need us most." She brought the bowl to him, now filled with a thick, steaming liquid that smelled of copper and midnight. "This is going to hurt," she warned. "The extraction ritual requires me to draw the poison out through your blood. It means opening your veins and channeling the toxins into a containment field." She gestured to the ritual circle on the floor. "You'll be conscious the entire time." "How long?" "An hour. Maybe 2". Lyra's expression softened. "I won't lie to you, most vampires don't survive this process. The pain is considerable." Alaric looked at her, this ancient warrior who'd lived in shadows for centuries, protecting a bloodline she'd probably never expected to serve again. "And if we don't do it, you die before dawn. And with you dies the last pureblood heir to the vampire throne." "What about Isabella?" The question escaped before he could stop it. Even now, poisoned and hunted, she occupied his thoughts. Lyra's expression hardened. "Our intelligence suggests she's being held in the restaurant's private wine cellar. Her parents can't risk her interfering with their plans." She moved to help him stand. "We decoded signals from their communication network. Lady Thornwell has been dosing Isabella's food with a mild sedative for weeks, keeping her compliant, dreamlike, easier to manipulate." Rage flared through Alaric's pain. "They drugged her." "They did worse." Lyra guided him to the ritual circle. "They've been using a blood mage to subtly influence her emotions. Every feeling she has for you, they're real, but amplified. Weaponized. They wanted her desperately in love with you, so when you died, her grief would be absolute. A perfect puppet for their new regime." Alaric sank to his knees inside the circle, the implications washing over him. Isabella, kind, genuine Isabella, had been a prisoner in her own mind for months. Maybe years. "The wine bottle," he said suddenly. "You mentioned a sigil earlier." Lyra nodded, pulling a photograph from her jacket. The image showed the bottle's base, where an intricate mark had been burned into the glass. A crimson cross wrapped in thorns, with a crescent moon at its center. The mark of the Crimson Faith, she explained. They're not just hunters, Your Majesty. They're zealots who believe vampires are a biblical plague. The treaty was always temporary in their eyes, a chance to gather strength, infiltrate, and strike when you were most vulnerable. The blood moon, Alaric breathed. When your powers fade, they'll perform the ritual. They've built an altar in the restaurant's foundation. We found the blueprints. Lord Thornwell will drain your essence while the eclipse peaks, transferring your royal bloodline into his family. Lyra began lighting candles around the ritual circle. His children will become immortal daywalkers. Human enough to rule the aristocracy, vampire enough to control the night. And your lineage, 3,000 years of royal blood, will be erased. Alaric's hands clenched into fists. 3,000 years. His ancestors had built the vampire kingdoms from scattered clans, had fought for recognition, for rights, for the chance to exist without persecution. His father had died to create the treaty. His mother had sacrificed herself to maintain it. And now some aristocrat with a grudge wanted to steal it all. Begin the ritual, Alaric commanded, his voice regaining its royal authority despite the poison ravaging his body. Draw the poison. I don't care how much it hurts. Lyra knelt across from him, drawing a silver dagger from her belt. Your Majesty, I need you to understand, even if we succeed, you'll be weak during the blood moon. Fighting them in your condition. I've survived 3 centuries of impossible odds, Alaric interrupted. I'll survive 3 more nights. His faded eyes met hers, and for a moment, the dying king became the warrior who'd conquered armies. Besides, they made one critical mistake. What's that? They assumed I'd die quietly. Alaric held out his wrists. Let's prove them wrong. Lyra nodded once, respect glinting in her ancient eyes. She pressed the dagger to his left wrist and whispered words in a language older than the city above them. The ritual began, and Alaric's screams echoed through the forgotten cathedral like a promise of vengeance. 2 days passed in a blur of agony and planning. The ritual had worked, but barely. Lyra had drawn most of the poison from Alaric's system, channeling the toxic mixture into crystal vials that now sat on the cathedral's altar, glowing faintly with malevolent energy. But the sanctified ash remained, embedded in his very essence like spiritual shrapnel. Every movement reminded him it was there, dulling his strength, limiting his speed. He was alive, but he was far from whole. Alaric sat in the cathedral's bell tower, watching the sun set over Elysium City through a broken window. The light didn't burn him, not yet. But as the blood moon approached, even indirect sunlight would become lethal. His powers were already fading, his connection to the primal darkness that fueled all vampires growing weaker by the hour. Below, in the nave, Lyra was speaking in hushed tones with someone. Alaric's dulled hearing couldn't quite catch the words, but he recognized the cadence of strategic planning. He stood carefully, his body still aching from the extraction ritual, and descended the spiral stairs. Each step felt heavier than it should, a reminder that time was running out. In the nave, Lyra was bent over a map of Elysium City, speaking with a tall figure in a dark cloak. As Alaric approached, the figure turned, pulling back its hood. Alaric's hand went instinctively to where his sword would normally hang. Marcus. His oldest knight, a vampire warrior who'd served 3 generations of kings, stood before him. Marcus's face was grim, new scars crossing his weathered features. Blood stained his armor. My king, Marcus dropped to one knee. Forgive my delay. Getting into the city unseen took longer than expected. You sent for him? Alaric asked Lyra. The moment we reached safety, she gestured to the map, now covered in notes and marked locations. Marcus brought intelligence from the underground court. Your Majesty, it's worse than we thought. Marcus stood, his expression dark. Lord Thornwell's alliance with the Crimson Faith goes back 20 years. They've been positioning themselves since before you took the throne. He pointed to marked locations on the map. They have operatives in the Royal Guard, the Human Council, even among your own advisors. Alaric felt cold fury building in his chest. Names. Lord Varen, your treasurer. Lady Ashwood, your diplomatic envoy. And Marcus hesitated. Chancellor Rothbart, your chief advisor. The betrayal hit like a physical blow. Rothbart had been his father's friend, had guided Alaric through his early years as king. You're certain? We intercepted his communications with the Vatican hunters. Marcus pulled out a leather journal, pages filled with coded messages. He's been feeding them information about the blood moon ritual for months. Timing, location, your security protocols, everything they needed. Lyra traced a finger across the map to the restaurant district. The blood moon eclipse peaks in 28 hours. That's when they'll move. She tapped a building, the same rooftop restaurant where this nightmare had begun. The ritual altar is here, in the subterranean levels. They've converted the old wine cellars into a ceremonial chamber. And Isabella? Alaric's voice was quieter now. Marcus exchanged a glance with Lyra before answering. Still held in the lower levels. Our scouts confirmed she's alive, but heavily guarded. They're keeping her sedated, probably to prevent her from interfering or escaping. She doesn't know, Alaric said. It wasn't a question. Our intelligence suggests she believes you abandoned her, Lyra said gently. Her parents told her you fled after discovering their modest wealth wasn't enough for a vampire king. They're painting you as a coward who used her for political gain. The manipulation was masterful. Even in captivity, Isabella was being turned against him. If she survived, she'd hate him, exactly as her parents intended. Marcus unfolded another document, this one bearing an official seal. There's more. Lord Thornwell has been negotiating with the vampire treasury. He plans to claim the royal vaults as reparations for his family's losses during the Blood Wars. The treasury holds more than gold, Alaric said, understanding dawning. It holds artifacts, ancient weapons, blood relics from the first vampire kings, including the Scepter of Dusk, Lyra confirmed. The ceremonial rod your ancestors used to bind the vampire clans into one kingdom. With that scepter and your drained bloodline, Thornwell could theoretically command every vampire in existence. Alaric moved to the map, studying the marked positions. How many hunters? At least 50 in the restaurant and surrounding buildings, Marcus reported. Plus whatever Vatican reinforcements they've called in. And that's not counting Thornwell's private security or the corrupted members of your own guard. We're outnumbered 10-1, Lyra added. And you're weakened. Your Majesty, a direct assault would be suicide. Alaric studied the map in silence, his tactical mind working through scenarios. The restaurant sat in the heart of the aristocratic district, heavy civilian presence, multiple escape routes for his enemies, and excellent defensive positions. A fortress disguised as fine dining. But there was something Lyra had said earlier, during the ritual, that kept nagging at him. The wine bottle, he said suddenly. You photographed the sigil. Have you decoded it fully? Lyra moved to the altar, retrieving the photograph and several books. Partially. The Crimson Faith's mark is layered. It's not just a symbol, it's a map, she laid out her notes. See these thorns? Each one corresponds to a location. A church, a safe house, a weapons cache. Or a member, Alaric finished, seeing it. This isn't just a mark of allegiance. It's a directory. A way to identify every member of the Crimson Faith in the city. Marcus leaned in, his eyes widening. If we could decode the entire sigil, we'd know exactly who's compromised, who we can trust. And where they're hiding their resources, Alaric felt the first spark of hope since this nightmare began. Lyra, how long to decode it completely? Hours. Maybe all night. She was already pulling out more reference texts. But Your Majesty, even with a complete list, we're still severely outnumbered. And the blood moon will make me vulnerable, Alaric interrupted. But it will also make them confident. Overconfident, he turned to Marcus. How many loyal knights can you gather before the eclipse? Maybe 20. 30 if we're lucky. Marcus's expression was grim. Most are scattered across the territories and travel time. Then we don't fight their army, Alaric said, his mind forming a plan. We cut off the head. Lord Thornwell, Lady Thornwell, and whoever this blood mage is that's facilitating the ritual. Remove them, and the Crimson Faith loses its coordination. A surgical strike, Lyra said, understanding. But you'd still need to reach Isabella. She's their insurance policy. If the ritual goes wrong, They'll kill her and blame you for everything. Alaric looked at the photograph of the wine bottle again, at the intricate sigil that had marked his attempted assassination. Somewhere in that symbol was the key to everything, the identities, the locations, the entire conspiracy laid bare. Decode that sigil, he ordered. Every thorn, every curve, every hidden meaning. I want names, locations, and hierarchies, he turned to Marcus. Gather whoever you can trust. Equip them for urban combat. We infiltrate during the eclipse, when they think I'm at my weakest. And if the ritual has already begun? Marcus asked. Alaric's eyes, still faded but burning with determination, met his knight's gaze. Then I'll tear down that restaurant brick by brick until I find her. Lyra and Marcus exchanged glances, then both knelt. By blood and darkness, they said in unison. We serve the throne. Then let's remind them, Alaric said, his voice carrying the weight of 3 centuries, what it means to hunt a king. Outside, the sun had fully set. The city lights flickered to life, indifferent to the war brewing in its shadows. The blood moon was rising. And with it, the reckoning. The eclipse began at midnight. Alaric felt it immediately, a draining sensation, as if someone had opened a tap in his soul and let his power bleed away. His enhanced vision dimmed. His supernatural strength faded to barely above human levels. Even his centuries of accumulated knowledge and instinct felt distant, muffled, as if wrapped in thick cloth. The blood moon turned the sky a deep crimson, casting Elysium City in shades of rust and shadow. Your Majesty, Lyra appeared beside him, fully armed now. Twin silver daggers at her hips, not blessed, she'd assured him, but consecrated to the old vampire gods. Protection, not poison. It's time. 23 vampires stood in the cathedral's ruins, all that Marcus had managed to gather. Most were young, barely a century old. A few bore the scars of true warriors. All looked terrified and determined in equal measure. They knew this was likely a suicide mission. The sigil gave us 12 names, Lyra reported, holding up the decoded document. 12 key members of the Crimson Faith operating in the city. 6 are stationed at the restaurant. 4 are in reserve locations. And 2, she paused. 2 are members of your royal council. Rothbart and... Alaric prompted. Lady Morgessa. Your master of arms. The betrayal cut deeper than any blade. Morgessa had trained him in combat, had stood beside his father during the final days of the Blood Wars. She'd sworn oaths written in blood and sealed with ancient magic. Blood oaths can be broken, Marcus said quietly, reading Alaric's expression. With enough holy magic and sufficient motivation. The Crimson Faith has Vatican resources. They'd know how. Alaric pushed the betrayal aside. Grief was a luxury he couldn't afford. The restaurant. Lyra unrolled the blueprint they'd obtained through channels Alaric didn't ask about. 6 levels. The main dining area we know. Below that, 3 levels of wine cellars and storage. Below that, she pointed to a chamber marked in red. The ritual room. And below even that, a holding cell. Isabella, Alaric breathed. Guarded by at least 10 hunters. Plus whatever magical wards they've established, Marcus traced potential entry points. The main entrance is suicide. The kitchen entrance is heavily monitored. But there's a maintenance tunnel, the same network we used to escape. They'll expect that, Alaric said. They know we used the tunnels before. Which is why half our force will enter through the tunnels, Lyra said with a predator's smile. Making noise, drawing attention, appearing to be the main assault. While the real strike team enters how? Alaric asked. Through the front door, Lyra's smile widened. You're going to walk in and surrender. The plan was insane. It was also the only option that made tactical sense. 30 minutes later, Alaric stood across the street from the restaurant, watching light pour from its windows. The building hummed with activity, guests arriving in formal wear, completely unaware of the ritual chamber hidden beneath their feet. Or perhaps they knew. Perhaps every person entering that building was part of the Crimson Faith's network. The eclipse peaks in 40 minutes, Marcus murmured beside him. He wore a server's uniform, stolen and tailored to fit his frame. Once you're inside, we'll have maybe 5 minutes before they realize our tunnel team is a diversion. 5 minutes to reach the ritual chamber, stop the blood mage, and extract Isabella. Alaric adjusted his collar. He dressed for the occasion, formal suit, no weapons visible. The picture of a vampire king coming to negotiate. Simple. Suicidal, Marcus corrected. That too, Alaric met his old friend's eyes. If I don't make it out. You'll make it out, Marcus interrupted. You're too stubborn to die. It's insufferably annoying. Despite everything, Alaric smiled. Thank you, old friend. Don't thank me until we're drinking victory wine in the royal palace. Marcus clasped his shoulder once. Go. We'll be ready. Alaric crossed the street, each step an act of will. The blood moon's power, or lack thereof, made him feel exposed, vulnerable in ways he hadn't experienced in centuries. Every human instinct he'd suppressed for 300 years suddenly roared back to life. Fear, doubt, mortality. The restaurant's doorman recognized him immediately. Alaric saw the man's hand move toward a concealed weapon, then pause as someone spoke into his earpiece. Your Majesty, the doorman said, his voice carefully neutral. We've been expecting you. I'm certain you have. Alaric walked past him into the foyer. The maitre d', a different one from 2 nights ago, waited with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Lord Thornwell requests your presence in the private dining room. If you'll follow me? They wanted him deeper in the building. Away from exits. Closer to the ritual chamber. Perfect. Alaric followed the maitre d' through the restaurant. Other diners watched him pass, with expressions ranging from curiosity to poorly concealed hostility. At a corner table, he spotted Lady Morgessa, his former master of arms, dining with a man in cardinal's robes. She raised her wine glass in mock salute as he passed. The gesture made his blood boil, but he kept his expression neutral. The maitre d' led him to a private elevator, its walls lined with mirrors. Alaric saw himself reflected infinitely, pale, weakened, but still carrying himself with royal bearing. He looked like a king walking to his execution. The elevator descended. Not to the main dining levels, but deeper. Much deeper. We're going to the ritual chamber, Alaric observed. The maitre d' said nothing, but his hand moved to rest on a concealed stake at his belt. The elevator doors opened onto a corridor carved from ancient stone. Torches flickered in wall sconces, real fire, not electric imitations. The air smelled of incense, blood, and old magic. At the corridor's end stood an ornate door, flanked by 2 hunters in full tactical gear. They parted silently as Alaric approached. Beyond the door, the ritual chamber waited. It was vast, circular, with a domed ceiling painted in astronomical charts. At the room's center stood an altar made of black marble, surrounded by a circle of holy symbols, but these weren't Christian crosses. They were older, darker. Symbols from religions that predated civilization. Lord Thornwell stood beside the altar, wearing ceremonial robes embroidered with the Crimson Faith sigil. Lady Thornwell stood opposite him, her face painted with ritualistic patterns. And between them, chained to the altar with blessed silver, was Isabella. She looked up as Alaric entered, and her expression shattered him. Not fear. Not relief. Hatred. You, she spat, her voice raw. You used me. You lied to me. Everything was a lie. Isabella, listen to me. Alaric started forward. Stop. Lord Thornwell's voice cracked like a whip. Hunters emerged from the shadows, at least 20, all armed with blessed weapons. One more step, and my dear daughter dies before her purpose is fulfilled. Alaric froze. Isabella was weeping now, struggling against the chains. You see, Your Majesty, Lady Thornwell purred. We've explained everything to Isabella. How you seduced her as part of a vampire plot to infiltrate human aristocracy. How this engagement was always about subjugating humanity, she smiled. She believes every word. The blood mage stepped from the shadows, a wizened man in tattered robes, his eyes completely white. The eclipse peaks in 3 minutes, he announced. We must begin. Lord Thornwell drew a ceremonial dagger, its blade glowing with holy light. Any last words, Your Majesty? Alaric looked at Isabella, at the tears streaming down her face, at the chains holding her to an altar where she'd witness his death. He smiled. Yes, he said. Thank you for gathering all my enemies in one place. It makes this so much easier. Above them, in the restaurant, Marcus whispered into his radio. He's in position. All teams go. And the cathedral bells began to toll. The explosion came from above, a thunderous blast that shook the ritual chamber, raining dust and fragments of ancient stone from the ceiling. The hunters spun toward the sound, weapons raised, just as Marcus and his team breached through the maintenance tunnels. But that wasn't the real surprise. The surprise was Alaric, who'd been playing weak and defeated, suddenly moving with speed that defied the Blood Moon's curse. He crossed the distance to Lord Thornwell in a heartbeat, his hand closing around the ceremonial dagger before it could descend toward the altar. Did you really think, Alaric growled, his eyes blazing crimson despite the eclipse, that I'd walk in here without a plan? He twisted, snapping Thornwell's wrist. The dagger clattered to the floor. The truth was simple. Lyra's antidote hadn't just purged the poison. It had contained a secondary compound, ancient vampire blood from the original royal line, sealed in crystal for 1,000 years. It couldn't restore his full power during the blood moon, but it could give him precious minutes of strength. Enough to fight. Kill him. Lady Thornwell shrieked. The chamber erupted into chaos. Hunters fired blessed crossbow bolts, but Marcus's team had already engaged them, turning the ritual chamber into a battlefield. Silver clashed against silver, holy water splashed across ancient stone, and battle cries echoed off the domed ceiling. Alaric spun away from Thornwell, his focus on Isabella. She stared at him with confused terror as he approached the altar. Isabella, I know what they told you, he began. Stay away from me. She thrashed against the chains. You're a monster. I am, Alaric agreed, his hands moving to examine the blessed silver chains. They burned his fingers, but he didn't flinch. I've been a monster for 300 years. But I never lied to you. Not once. My parents said. Your parents have been drugging you for months, Alaric interrupted, finally finding the chain's weak point. Sedatives in your food. Blood magic to amplify your emotions. They turned your love into a weapon, Isabella. Against both of us. He wrenched the chain with strength born of desperation. The blessed silver screamed as it broke, and so did Alaric, his hands burning down to the bone. But the chain snapped. Isabella's left arm was free. Behind them, Lord Thornwell had recovered, and he was no longer playing the civilized aristocrat. His face was twisted with rage as he grabbed a blessed sword from a fallen hunter. You've destroyed everything. My family's honor. My revenge. I'll gut you myself. He charged, the holy blade aimed at Alaric's heart. But before he could strike, the blood mage raised his hands, and suddenly Alaric felt it, an invisible force gripping his chest, squeezing his heart. The old magic, the ritual that had been prepared for weeks, activating despite the interruption. The blood moon is at its peak, the blood mage intoned, his white eyes glowing. The vessel is prepared. The sacrifice is here. The transfer will proceed. Red light erupted from the altar, forming a beam that connected directly to Alaric's chest. He gasped as he felt his essence, his royal bloodline, beginning to flow outward. The sensation was horrifying, like his soul was being drained through a straw. No, Isabella screamed. Whatever drugs had clouded her mind, whatever manipulation had poisoned her thoughts, they shattered in that moment. She saw Alaric falling to his knees, saw the light draining from his eyes, and remembered. She remembered real conversations, not the twisted versions her parents had fed her. She remembered Alaric's gentleness, his patience, the way he'd listened to her dreams of uniting their worlds. She remembered falling in love not because of magic, but because of him. With her free hand, Isabella grabbed the ceremonial dagger Alaric had knocked away. The blade burned her human flesh, but she didn't care. She drove it into the altar itself, right into the center of the ritual circle carved into the marble. The beam flickered. What have you done? The blood mage shrieked. I'm ending this. Isabella twisted the blade, breaking the circle. The ritual's power fractured, the red light sputtering like a dying flame. Lord Thornwell backhanded his daughter across the face, sending her sprawling. Foolish girl. You've ruined everything. That was his final mistake. Alaric rose, the ritual's grip broken, and something fundamental shifted in the chamber. His eyes weren't just crimson anymore, they were burning with an inner fire that had nothing to do with vampiric power. This was pure rage, pure protective fury. "You," Alaric said, his voice dropping to a deadly whisper, "just struck the woman I love." The temperature in the chamber plummeted. Frost crept across the walls despite the torches. Even the Blood Moon's curse seemed to recoil from the primal fury radiating from the Vampire King. Alaric moved like death itself. He caught Lord Thornwell's blessed sword with his bare, burned hand, ignoring the agony, and yanked it from the aristocrat's grip. In one fluid motion, he reversed it and drove the pommel into Thornwell's chest, sending him crashing into the altar. Lady Thornwell screamed, pulling a vial of holy water from her robes. She threw it at Alaric, but he was already moving too fast to trek. The vial shattered harmlessly against stone as Alaric appeared beside her. "You drugged her," he said softly. "You manipulated her. You used your own daughter as bait." His hand closed around Lady Thornwell's wrist, not breaking it, but holding it in an unbreakable grip. "What kind of parents are you?" "The kind who remember what your kind did to us." Lady Thornwell spat. "The kind who lost everything in your blood wars. My father, my brothers, our entire family fortune, all because of vampire tyranny." "So you became exactly what you claimed to hate," Alaric said. "Tyrants. Murderers. Betrayers." Around them, the battle was turning. Marcus and his team had overcome the hunters, and more reinforcements were pouring in from above. The Crimson Faith's carefully laid plans were unraveling. The Blood Mage made one final desperate attempt, channeling the last of the ritual's power directly at Alaric. Holy fire erupted from his hands, burning brighter than the sun. But Lyra was faster. She threw herself between Alaric and the flames, her body absorbing the blast. She screamed as holy fire consumed her, the old protection magic in her blood fighting against the assault. "Lyra." Alaric caught her as she fell, her body smoking. "The vault," she gasped, her ancient life finally burning away. "The scepter of dusk. Use it. Command them all." She died in his arms, 243 years of loyal service ending in a burst of holy flame. Alaric laid her down gently, his burned hands trembling. Then he looked up at the Blood Mage, and his expression was no longer human. No longer civilized. No longer merciful. "Marcus," he said quietly. "Take Isabella somewhere safe." "Your Majesty," Marcus started. "Now." Marcus didn't argue. He scooped up Isabella, who was reaching for Alaric, calling his name, and carried her from the chamber. Alaric stood alone in the center of the ritual room, surrounded by the Crimson Faith's remnants. Lord and Lady Thornwell, backing away. The Blood Mage, already preparing another spell. A dozen hunters, weapons drawn. Above, the blood moon reached its absolute peak. Alaric's power was at its lowest point. He smiled. "Lyra died to protect a throne that will outlast all of you," he said. "Let me show you why." And then Alaric did something no vampire king had done in 5 centuries. He released every restraint, every careful control, every civilized limitation he'd maintained for 300 years. The beast beneath the crown, the predator beneath the politician, the monster beneath the man, all of it unleashed at once. The ritual chamber flooded with darkness so absolute it devoured the torchlight. And in that darkness, Alaric hunted. 3 days after the blood moon, Alaric sat alone in the rooftop restaurant. The building had been rebuilt with surprising speed, blood money and guilty consciences worked wonders. Fresh paint covered the scorch marks. New marble replaced the cracked floors. Even the chandelier had been restored, casting the same fractured rainbows across white tablecloths. But the restaurant was empty. No diners. No staff. Just Alaric at table 7, a glass of wine before him, untainted this time. He'd made certain of that, and the ghost of memories he couldn't escape. The battle in the ritual chamber had lasted 4 minutes. When the darkness cleared, Lord Thornwell was dead, his neck snapped cleanly. Lady Thornwell had survived, barely, her mind shattered by what she'd witnessed in that absolute darkness. The Blood Mage had simply Vanished. No body, no trace, as if he'd never existed. The hunters who survived fled the city and were still running. The Crimson Faith's network had collapsed overnight. Rothbart and Morgessa were in the royal dungeons, their betrayals exposed. The Vatican had issued formal apologies, distancing themselves from the extremist faction. The peace treaty had been reinforced with new provisions, new protections, new consequences for betrayal. Victory, by any measure. So why did it taste like ash? Your Majesty. Alaric looked up. Lyra stood in the doorway, not the original Lyra, but her successor. Another member of the Order of the Crimson Veil, younger, but carrying the same ancient weight in her eyes. She wore the insignia of royal protector now, a silver pendant shaped like a blood drop and a crescent moon. Report, Alaric said softly. The last of the Crimson Faith's safe houses have been cleared. We recovered weapons caches, documents, and 37 prisoners. She approached the table, standing at attention. The Human Council has requested an audience next week to discuss reparations. And Isabella? Lyra's expression softened slightly. She's been relocated to the countryside estate, as you ordered. The memory mages completed their work this morning. Alaric's hand tightened around his wine glass. And? She remembers nothing of the engagement, the dinner, the ritual, any of it. As far as Isabella Thornwell knows, she's been recovering from a prolonged illness at her family's country home. Her parents, Lyra paused. Her father's death has been attributed to a heart attack. Her mother is in a private medical facility, receiving treatment for her condition. Condition, Alaric repeated bitterly. Is that what we're calling it? Trauma-induced psychosis, Lyra said clinically. She babbles about darkness and monsters. The doctors believe she'll never recover. Good, Alaric thought, then immediately hated himself for thinking it. Lady Thornwell had been a monster, yes, but she'd also been a mother, a twisted, manipulative mother, but Isabella's mother nonetheless. And he'd taken that from her along with everything else. The memory wipe was necessary, Lyra said, reading his expression. Isabella's testimony would have implicated dozens of human families, reignited the conflict, possibly started another war. This way she's free. Safe. She can build a new life. A life without the truth, Alaric said. A life without trauma, Lyra corrected. Your Majesty, you gave her a gift. Most people would. Most people didn't love her, the words came out harsher than intended. Alaric set down his wine glass before he shattered it. I could have let her remember. I could have fought for. For what? A relationship built on her family's betrayal? On the memory of watching you kill her father. Lyra shook her head. That's not love, Your Majesty. That's selfishness. Alaric wanted to argue, but the words died in his throat. Because she was right. Keeping Isabella, forcing her to remember the horror of that night, watching her struggle with the knowledge of what her family had done, that would have been cruel. Monstrous. So instead, he'd done the merciful thing. The kingly thing. He'd let her go. Has she asked about me? The question was pathetic, and Alaric knew it, but he had to know. Once, Lyra admitted. She asked a servant if she'd had any suitors recently. The servant said no. She paused. Isabella seemed relieved. Of course she did. Even with the memories erased, some part of her knew. Some instinct warned her away from the vampire king who'd stolen months of her life, who'd brought death to her family's doorstep. Alaric stood, moving to the floor-to-ceiling windows. The city sprawled below, oblivious to how close it had come to another blood war. In the distance, he could see the cathedral where Lyra, the original Lyra, had saved his life. Where she'd died protecting him. The vault, he said. The Scepter of Dusk. Did we recover it? Yes, Your Majesty. It's in your private chambers under guard. The Scepter of Dusk, the artifact that could command every vampire in existence. Lord Thornwell had wanted it to enslave an entire species. Instead, it had returned to its rightful owner. Alaric had held it once, the night after the battle. Felt its power thrumming through the ancient metal. With that scepter, he could rebuild the vampire kingdom stronger than ever. Could ensure no human ever dared threaten them again. He locked it away immediately. Power like that was too tempting. Too dangerous. His grandfather had wielded it wisely. His father had refused to touch it. Alaric would follow his father's example. The piece they wanted to poison, Alaric murmured, repeating the words he'd spoken to himself 100 times since that night. I will now rebuild in blood and truth. Your Majesty? Lyra asked. Alaric turned from the window. Contact the Human Council. Tell them I accept their request for an audience. His voice carried the weight of 3 centuries, the authority of the crown he'd defended with everything he had. But tell them the terms have changed. No more secret alliances. No more hidden agendas. If they want peace, it will be built on transparency, on accountability. And if they refuse, then they'll learn what it means to face a vampire king who has nothing left to lose. Alaric's smile was cold. I spared them once because I wanted Isabella's world intact. That incentive no longer exists. Lyra bowed. I'll deliver the message. She turned to leave, but Alaric called her back. Lyra, your predecessor, she served loyally for over 2 centuries. Make sure her sacrifice is recorded in the royal archives. Make sure history remembers what she did. Of course, Your Majesty. Alone again, Alaric returned to table 7. His wine sat untouched, reflecting the chandelier's fractured light. He could still see Isabella sitting across from him in his mind's eye, smiling that innocent smile, completely unaware of the poison in his glass and the daggers hidden in her parents' hearts. She was free now. Truly free. She'd live a normal life, marry a normal man, have normal children. She'd never know she'd been engaged to a monster, never know she'd been days away from a nightmare. And Alaric would carry that knowledge alone. His phone buzzed, a text from Marcus. The council's already responding. They want to negotiate. You scared them. Good, Alaric typed back. Fear is the foundation of respect. He pocketed the phone and stood, taking one last look at the restaurant. This place had been meant to celebrate a union, a new chapter in vampire-human relations. Instead, it had become a battlefield, a tomb, a reminder of how close everything had come to collapsing. But it had also been a crucible. The conspiracy had been burned away. The traitors exposed. The vampire throne secured. As Alaric walked out of the empty restaurant, Lyra fell into step beside him. The night air was cool, the city peaceful. No church bells tolled. No hunters lurked in shadows. Where to, Your Majesty? She asked. Alaric looked toward the horizon, where the countryside estates lay beyond the city limits. Somewhere out there, Isabella was sleeping peacefully, dreaming dreams uncomplicated by vampire kings and blood rituals. The palace, he said finally. We have a kingdom to rebuild. And the girl. Alaric was silent for a long moment. Then, the girl gets to be happy. That's all that matters. They walked through the streets of Elysium City, vampire king and loyal protector, as dawn began to paint the horizon in shades of gold and crimson. The blood moon was over. The war was won. But as Alaric had learned 3 centuries ago, some battles left scars that never healed. He would rebuild the peace. He would strengthen the treaty. He would rule with wisdom and strength, just as his ancestors had. But late at night, in the quiet moments between duty and dawn, he would remember the woman with emerald eyes who'd loved a monster without knowing it. And he would wonder if, somewhere in her erased memories, she still dreamed of crimson wine and whispered warnings. Of a love that almost was. Of a king who let her go.